Jai Prabhuji. Welcome everyone. My name is Swami Yogananda. I've been a disciple of Prabhuji since 1997, which is about 26 years since I was officially initiated by Prabhuji. This is our second meeting in Prabhuji video lecture commentaries. And in this meeting, I decided to speak about a lecture that is called Hatha Yoga, asana or yogic postures. I did that because I thought that it's a great continuation to our first meeting, and as a result of the subject that Prabhuji raises in it. Slightly different from the previous talk is that we're going to use a few excerpts out of the video, and we're going to refer to them as we go along. Now, the first part that we are going to refer to from this lecture also starts with a question, and the question is about Hatha Yoga.
Prabhuji, you have learned and taught Hatha Yoga for many years. Could you share, please, what place Hatha Yoga has in your message? What's the importance of asanas and postures in your teachings?
First of all, I want to clarify that my words, talks, books, are not teachings. This is not a message.
So as we heard, Prabhuji is being asked what is the place that Hatha Yoga has in his teaching. And before he starts answering, Prabhuji straight away clarifies that these are not teachings. And as we spoke in our introductory meeting, if you remember, the subject was no sadhana, no dogmas, no do and don'ts. This is a point that we always need to remember when we listen to Prabhuji, because we can get very, very confused. Prabhuji can talk about so many different subjects, spiritual subject, religious subject. He may speak about different religious books, and we can get very confused when listening to him. Try to look in all these things, some dogma, some teaching, some instruction, something that will tell us what to do. And Prabhuji straight away corrects the way the question was asked and tell us again that he is not a preacher. He is not giving dogmas. He's not gonna give us the answer in a way of, okay, do A, B, C, D, and you're gonna get E, F, D. No, he's making sure that we are on the right track when we listen to him, and to try to understand that this is not about teaching. And as he actually himself says in the next sentence, he says, it's not about teaching, it's about deprogramming. And what Prabhuji is trying to tell us here is that society has been programmed for so long. And what he reminds us really that what we need now is not another program. On the contrary, now it's a time to clean things, to get rid of things, to evacuate things, to create space, not to add things to ourselves. We're already so full. Another thing that I wanted to refer to in this regard is something that I personally paid attention in a lot of Prabhuji's lectures, and that is at the beginning of each lecture, Prabhuji will use the opening or the question or something from within to collect all our attention before he starts and speak about the actual subject of the lecture that he wants to talk about. And he always makes sure that whoever listens to him was brought in or was gathered from no matter where the listener's mind has wandered off to. And he does that by collecting everyone's attention, no matter where it's from, into the subject he wants to talk about. And that shows us very much how much Prabhuji is aware and understand the human mind, the egoic phenomenon. Things that we take for granted and we think, oh yeah, the mind jumps from one thing to another. We are always scattered. We are used to living with a mind that is all over the place. We think that it's normal, that it's regular, that our mind jumps from one thing to another. We forget that there's another option, that the mind is calm. But for us, this seems naturally. But in order for us to be able to absorb something, in order for us to be able to understand, we need to be in the present. Especially when we're discussing such a subtle subject, a spiritual subject or religious subject, and when we listen to enlightened masters and spiritual masters, the knowledge that we can refer to as known is only the knowledge that we can live according to. And in order for that to happen, for us to be able to absorb what we are listening to, the mind has to be calmer. And for that to be in the present, we need all our awareness, all the rays of our awareness to be gathered in, so the mind doesn't feel that it has to be center stage. It sort of can relax a little bit. The functioning of the mind is survival. And as a survival tool, it always needs to be alert to see where danger can come. But if we calm the mind, if we bring all the rays of our awareness to one thing, and in this case, it's the subject that Prabhuji wants to talk about, and we are more focused, the mind naturally comes down. And that allows the words to enter and to transform us. It's not so much about knowing more scriptures or accumulating the knowledge. It's more about to be able to bathe in the words of the master. And what Prabhuji is doing is, in this lecture, he is making sure that at least for the length of the lecture, or for how long we are of the lecture we are listening to, we are here and now, we were gathered in, and we are less mind, so we can observe what he is speaking about. And particularly in this lecture, Prabhuji is using the question that was asked and the correction of the phrasing in order to do that. And that is something that Prabhuji generally has mentioned it to us many, many times, and that is in order to keep the interest, if you want really for something to interest you, to generate interest, the only thing that you need is to be aware. More awareness, more interest. And this is something that is really good to remember, because we tend to fall into habituary things, and some things that we do on a regular basis become too obvious to us. We don't pay attention to them very much. They become redundant. But if we will bring back our attention to everything that we do and increase it every time, nothing will be not interesting. Nothing will become obvious or redundant. Everything will generate interest over and over again. Now we are going to listen to another short part from the lecture, and that's going to be the start of Prabhuji's reply about Hatha Yoga.
I was honored to learn from big masters, to meet them personally. His Holiness Shri Shri Swami Vishnu Devananda, disciple of His Holiness Shri Shri Swami Shivananda from Rishikesh, His Holiness Shri Shri Swami Jyotirmayananda, my dear Bapuji, disciple of my Param Guru, His Divine Grace, Avadut Shri Mastaram Babaji Maharaj, Shri Madana Mohan, etc., etc. I practice it for many years, and I teach.
So you may be wondering why I especially use this part of the lecture where seemingly Prabhuji is only listing the name of the Hatha Yoga masters and teachers that he had along his path. But really what Prabhuji is doing here is two things together. He is doing one thing that is totally in accordance with the Vedic tradition, and that he is giving homage to all the masters and teachers of Hatha Yoga that he had throughout his life. And at the same time, he's showing us the way to live the retroprogressive path, exactly by doing this. The homage to the masters and yoga teacher is the retro out of the retroprogressive path. And the exposition of how to live the retroprogressive path is through the fact that he is mentioning them when he speaks about whatever is going to happen. Now, the uniqueness, and I'll explain it, the uniqueness of it is that usually what we see in society are two extremes. Society is sort of divided between the ones who only lives in the past or wants to mainly stay in the retro, from the more or less philosophy of living in the world and not belonging to the world. And that is, you can see that in the communities of the Hamish around the United States, or to a larger or lesser extent in the Mennonites, the Quakers, or the Mormons. And as I said, it's as a result of the philosophy of living in the world without belonging to the world. And then we have most of the world that wants totally to break away from the old, from the past. Not only physically, also conceptually, and the push in advancement in all levels. And not to let anything from the old sort of come back or be part of this. Totally to push for advancement as much as possible. Now, the retroprogressive yoga path of Prabhuji is telling us something totally different. What he's telling us is that the past is very much part of our present and future. And not in a sentimental kind of a way that people love to reminisce about the good old days. No, not about that at all. The past, or what we have been through up until now, is very much part of our mind and how we see ourselves and other and the world around us, which is our present. We live through the mind. Our identification with the name, with the body, with a certain form comes from our identification with the mind, or what we call the I, or the I idea. And it all happens in the now, in the present, but it's fully affected by the past. The mind actually doesn't have a differentiation between the past, present, and future. When people experience trauma, for an instance, the reaction that arises is very much in the present, even though the situation might have happened in the past. You can see people that have a reaction of a traumatic effect now, and they react exactly as if the moment or the trauma happens now, all the symptoms through the body. But the trauma might have happened a long time ago, much previous to this. But because of the mind, and because our identification with the mind, for the person who goes through that, it seems real, as if it happens right now. Now, in the retroprogressive path, the issue is not to get rid of the past. It is not to solve the past or to remove it with psychology or other method. It is to be aware of it, so much so that the identification with the mind and all that it carries in it, everything that happened in the past, everything that I think myself as a result, all that will be broken, and we will be able to see every aspect of ourselves clearly, but without the being affected by it. Only as a result of the disidentification the observation creates. Because everything I can observe, it means there is a distance between me and the thing itself, no matter what it is that I'm observing, no matter how minute the distance is. It means that I am not that thing. And everything I can observe, it means I am the observer, but I'm not the observed. No matter how close is it to me, it can be my thought, it can be my feelings, it can be things that are very subtle and very close to me, which are of course more difficult to observe. But it means that if I can observe them, they are not me. I can see them, I can identify them, but it means they are not me. And therefore, there's a distance that the more I'm aware and the more I observe, the distance grows. And my past, which is part of my mind, cannot affect me in that way because I'm disconnecting the past and its effect on me at the moment. Not that it's not gonna be there. That's where the healing can take place by itself. And actually the process is that to know the past, to own the past. That's a very important point. By owning the past, that's the only way I can progress forward. Not ruled by it, but by knowing it and getting familiar with it. I'm not being affected by it, but he's like a companion. It's like a wise friend that taught us so much along the way, but doesn't affect our present in a destructive way. I very much like the allegory of the tree in the forest, that in order for the tree in the forest to go as high as it can, the roots needs to be as double deep in the ground. So then Prabhuji starts talking about Hatha Yoga, and he is mentioning that he practiced Hatha Yoga for many years, and that he taught for many, many years. And then he says the following.
Hatha Yoga as a psychophysiology method has a very central place in my life. Not only as exercises or a method to achieve better health.
So here Prabhuji is saying something that I absolutely love. And the sentence is, and I'm going to quote, is Hatha Yoga is a psychophysiology method, has a very certain place in my life, not only as an exercise or a method to achieve better health. And what Prabhuji is doing here is giving us a quick reminder about Hatha Yoga and the path it belongs to. And why I'm saying that? Because Hatha Yoga is part of Raja Yoga. It's a path within the 6 darshanas in the Sanatana Dharma, or what the West refers to as Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma is what is translated into English as the eternal religion or eternal Dharma. Dharma is not so much a religion in the way the West conceptualize a religion, but it's more a cosmic order in a way. So it's the eternal cosmic order. And the word yoga means union. And Raja Yoga is the path that deals with the mind, that is referred to as the Raja or the king of the senses. So Raja Yoga is the mind and yoga is the union. So that is the path that deals with the mind, that is referred to, as I said, as the king of the senses. And this path is all about searching for moksha or liberation in this lifetime. And by saying this, Prabhuji is reminding us of the place that Hatha Yoga has in the search for liberation. And not only as a method for better health. And it is like we are getting here an invitation from Prabhuji to investigate into the path of Raja Yoga, that Hatha Yoga is very much a part of it. So Hatha Yoga is part of the Raja Yoga path that deals with the mind and the way to manage the mind in order to be able eventually reach moksha or reach liberation. And because the mind is elusive and difficult to manage, and because we are identified with the body and mind, as we spoke earlier, the body becomes one of the great tools in order to manage the mind. And as Prabhuji wrote about Raja Yoga observes the mind, studies it, contemplates it, knows it, and finally goes beyond it. So we go through the process of, in Raja Yoga, we go through the process of a few stages. One is yama, which is abstentions, things that we try to avoid. Niyama, which is observances, which are the things that we try to keep. Asanas, now Hatha Yoga comes in the picture. Yogic posture, or Hatha Yoga. Then we have pranayama, which is the breathing exercises. Then we have pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. Dharan is the next, which is concentration. And last, or not last, sorry, dhyana is meditation. And last, the ultimate, which is samadhi, or enlightenment. Now, we are not going to talk about all the path of Raja Yoga here and to go into every aspect, but I really do recommend for everyone that you will read in the book of Prabhuji, What Is As It Is, the chapter about Hatha Yoga. I think it's the first chapter. And there are 4 amazing transcriptions of lectures that Prabhuji gave about Hatha Yoga in the book. And I think it's going to give a great perspective of Hatha Yoga within Raja Yoga and within the spiritual path. So in connection to that, Prabhuji is going next into why self-inquiry is needed in a way. He's actually showing us how and where we got lost with our identification with the body-mind complex. He's actually referring to the issue we mentioned shortly at the start of the lecture in regards to our identification with the I or the I idea, as we said, and thinking that it confines us into a form. And what he is doing in this part of the talk or lecture, he is showing us how self-inquiry works. We are getting from Prabhuji a masterclass in how to investigate into oneself or into ourself. And he is actually telling us that in the lecture, he's saying that is a process of discovery. Like when we ask, who am I? And the direct experience that I exist and I know that I exist, that comes out of asking that question. And not through teaching or dogmas or books or external information from somewhere else. No, by that mere question that one may ask himself, who am I? And the contemplation into that gives you this, I exist and I know that I exist. And he is showing us and telling us in this lecture, let's go hand by hand. Let's go and check through Hatha Yoga. He invites us to investigate with him, to analyze, to discover by ourselves who we are by direct perception that the investigation leads us to. And he is even showing us an example of how the investigation goes by observation and the logic that accompanies in us when checking that observation that we go through and the question and the answers that we give ourselves. I think it's a very important point in the lecture when Prabhuji is showing us how to process the question and the conclusion that arises as a result of that. And how to check ourselves to make sure that we don't get to any stupid conclusion while validating what we see and the experience, and that we are indeed in the right direction. Because what happens is that many times, if you can find that people think that in this road, in the spiritual path, you need to get or to acquire or to get to absurdities in order to show everyone else that I experience something of the truth, that I know something from the beyond. And what Prabhuji is showing us here, that no absurdity is needed. You should be able logically to explain the path and the route you go through, and the conclusion you arrive to. Like the understanding that everything I perceive cannot be me. As we mentioned earlier, that there must be a distance between the perceiver and the object. And as Prabhuji explains after, that that's the way to check it, is by seeing that where we hear and see sounds and sights, that we will still be there after they are gone. We are the perceiver. We should be able to explain and stretch the mind to the maximum until the point that we jump beyond the mind, until we transcend the mind. So Prabhuji is basically showing us that not the concept that sometimes people have of getting rid of the mind and jumping into all kinds of absurdities, that's not really the way. The mind, the body in Hatha Yoga, the mind in the process is something that we need to use because those are the tools that we have, but we need to stretch them to the maximum. And what happened to the mind when you stretch it to the maximum? It drops. That allows us to go beyond. This is actually the way that Prabhuji is leading us into the main subject of the lecture, that is the Hatha Yoga, and how Hatha Yoga does the same thing in the process of disidentification with the body. Now, I'm not saying here on purpose all the things that Prabhuji was talking about in the lecture in this regard, because I really, really would like all of you to go and listen to the lecture and listen to it directly from Prabhuji. Something very amazing in this lecture is that Prabhuji speaks from a very deep meditative space, and his words just sort of wash over you, and you can receive so much just by being attentive and listening to this lecture. And when Prabhuji explains about Hatha Yoga, the path, and how Hatha Yoga is part of this path of self-realization. So thank you very much for joining me, and Jai Prabhuji.